Jacque Sue Waller called her sister on June 1st, 2011, and said she was doing one simple thing, picking up her son from Klay Waller's house, then coming straight home. But 3 hours later, Jacque was gone. Her sister Cheryl called her again and again, no answer, and then she called Klay. At first, he ignored the calls, so Cheryl left him a message. "Klay Waller, if I don't hear from my sister in 5 minutes, I am going straight to the police." Then Klay called back. Cheryl said, "You know exactly what's going on. Where is my sister? You've done something to her." And Klay replied, "Well, if I see her, I'll let you know. I'll tell her call." That answer told Cheryl everything. By midnight, Jacque was reported missing. By the next morning, her car was found abandoned near Interstate 55, with a tire investigators later believed had been staged. Then they searched Klay's house. The hallway carpet was missing. There was blood on the wall, and hidden beneath the floor, investigators found pieces of that same carpet, cut up and pushed into a crawl space. Klay had an explanation for all of it, but the evidence had already started telling a different story, and this would go on to become one of the most disturbing cases in Southeast Missouri. The story of a woman who tried to leave safely, a sister who knew something was wrong from the beginning, and a man who thought he could escape justice, and almost did. Before we get into it, if you end up finding this video engaging, feel free to leave a like and share your thoughts on the case in the comments. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing for more content like this. Thank you. This video is intended strictly for educational and documentary purposes. It does not support, promote, or justify any of the actions or individuals involved. Viewer discretion is advised.
To look at this happy holiday gathering of family and friends.
Before Jacque Sue Waller became the center of a case that would pull in police, prosecutors, search teams, and federal investigators, she was a 39-year-old mother in Missouri trying to rebuild her life one careful step at a time. Her full name was Jacque Sue Waller, and by 2011, she had been married to Klay Waller for around 15 years. Together they had 3 children, triplets named Avery, Maddox, and Addison, and from the way her family later spoke about her, it was clear those children were not just part of her life. They were the center of it. Jacque worked in a managerial role at a major insurance firm, so she had a demanding job, but she still carried the weight of motherhood with a kind of warmth people remembered. But one of the most important relationships in Jacque's life was with her older sister, Cheryl Brennicky. Cheryl and Jacque had not always been extremely close. Cheryl married Bob when she was only 16, and Jacque was around 10 years old at the time. So while Jacque was still a child, Cheryl was already stepping into adult life. She was building a marriage, starting a family, and dealing with responsibilities that made her grow up quickly. Because of that, the sisters moved through different stages of life at different times, and for years there was distance between them. But then Jacque became pregnant, and that changed the relationship. Motherhood gave them something they had not really shared before. Cheryl understood what Jacque was stepping into. She understood the fear, the excitement, the exhaustion, and the way children could suddenly become the center of every decision. So when Jacque became a mother, the gap between the sisters began to close. Cheryl later said, "That's whenever we bonded." And that bond would become one of the most important parts of the entire story, because Cheryl was not a sister watching Jacque's life from a distance. She was close enough to notice the small changes. She knew when Jacque was happy, and she knew when something had started to weigh on her. But the man at the center of this case, James Klay Waller II, was not a stranger who entered Jacque's life at the end of the story. He was her husband, the father of her 3 children, and by 2011, the man she was trying to separate from. To Jacque's family, Klay had never felt like the right fit.
I always knew he was kind of a jerk.
And Dad, what did you think?
What did I think about him?
Yeah, what did you think
I
about
didn't like him the first minute I seen him.
Her father, Stan Rawson, later said he did not like Klay from the first minute he saw him, and that feeling did not fade with time. Other family members felt the same way. They saw something in him that made them uncomfortable, and even before the marriage reached its breaking point, they did not believe he belonged in the life Jacque was trying to build. Klay had once worked as a deputy with the Cape Girardeau County Sheriff's Office, but that job did not last long. He reportedly held the position for about a year, and someone who knew him from that time described him as having a deceptive demeanor.
Did you know him?
Yes. He kind of had a little streak about him that I didn't particularly care for.
What do you mean by that, a little streak?
He had kind of a deceptive demeanor about him.
That detail mattered later because Klay was not someone who knew nothing about police work. He had been close enough to law enforcement to understand how investigations moved, how searches worked, and how officers might try to track a suspect's movements. But while Klay moved from job to job, Jacques became the steady one in the family. Cheryl later described the marriage in a way that said everything about the imbalance. She said, "It was just like having another child." Then she added, "I seriously do not think he changed one diaper."
It was just like having another child. I seriously do not think he changed one diaper. She would seriously get up 9 or 10 times a night and still work 40 hours a week.
So over time, Jacques began pulling away. She started spending more time with Cheryl's family, and that was not just because she enjoyed being around her sister. It was because it gave Jacques space to think, and it gave her a place where she could talk honestly about what was happening inside the marriage. But that's not all. Klay had affairs, and Jacques confronted him about them. But when she brought those concerns to him, he denied things. And as the marriage continued to fall apart, Jacques' concerns became more serious than betrayal or disappointment. She began to feel that leaving Klay was not just emotionally difficult, she believed it could be dangerous. That was why she did not plan to walk out suddenly. Cheryl later explained that Jacques wanted a divorce, but she believed she had to leave slowly. Then investigators later found something that showed Jacques had been keeping track of that fear. After she disappeared, police recovered her laptop or work computer, and on it, they found a diary.
Fearing for her life, Jacque Waller starts keeping a diary on her work computer of all the threats Klay was making towards her and her triplets.
In that diary, Jacque had written down threats she said Klay had made. These were not vague complaints written after a normal argument. They were specific warnings tied to divorce, to control, and to what might happen if she finally left. In one entry, Jacques wrote, "I told him that I was going to file for divorce. He said that he had a feeling that one of us would not be around to watch our kids grow up." In another entry, she wrote, "Klay told me that I did not deserve to live." Then there was another line that cut even closer to what she was trying to escape. Jacques wrote, "He told me that a divorce would be my death sentence." There was also an entry involving the children, one that showed why Jacques' fear was not only for herself. She wrote that Klay had threatened the children if he could not have her. The detail was painful, and it was the kind of thing that made Cheryl and the rest of the family take Jacques' fear seriously. At one point, Jacques looked Cheryl in the eye and said, "Cheryl, I know what he is capable of, and I just don't want to be dead." That was not the kind of sentence a sister forgot. However, the separation happened in a practical way before it became a legal one. Klay lost another job and the couple lost their house. For Jacques, that loss opened a door. It gave her a reason to move away, to create distance, and to start building a life that was no longer centered around Klay. So she took the triplets and moved in with Cheryl and Bob in St. Genevieve. Klay moved more than an hour away to Jackson, Missouri, where he stayed in a house owned by a friend. For the first time in a long time, there was real space between them, and for a while she seemed to believe the separation might actually be working, but the divorce was not finished. There was still paperwork to complete, custody to handle, and one more meeting to get through. So, on June 1st, 2011, Jacque Sue Waller met Klay Waller at an attorney's office in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. This was supposed to be part of the divorce process. It was not meant to be a long visit, and it was not supposed to turn into the last confirmed movement of her life. From Jacques' side, the plan was simple. She would finish the meeting, go to Klay's house, pick up her son Maddox, and then return to Cheryl's home in St. Genevieve. After the meeting ended, Jacques called Cheryl. She sounded normal enough for Cheryl to believe she was doing exactly what she said she was doing. Jacques told her, "I just left the attorney's office and I'm pulling up to Klay's and I'm going to grab Maddox and I'll be on home." And this was not just something she told Cheryl. Around 3:56 p.m., Jacques also spoke to the man she had begun seeing after the separation, and she told him the same thing. She was picking up her son and heading home. But then 3 hours passed. Jacques did not come home. At first, Cheryl waited with the kind of worry anyone might feel when someone was late. But as the evening dragged on, that worry changed into something sharper. Cheryl knew Jacques. She knew Jacques had the children in mind with almost every decision she made. And she knew that if Jacques said she was coming home, especially after picking up one of the triplets, she would not simply disappear without answering anyone. So Cheryl started calling. She called Jacques' phone again and again. She left messages, she waited, and then she called again. But there was still no answer. And then Cheryl called Klay. At first, he did not respond either. That silence made the feeling worse, because Klay was the person Jacques had gone to see. He was the last person connected to the place Jacques said she was arriving, so Cheryl left him a message that was not soft and was not uncertain. She said, "Klay Waller, if I don't hear from my sister in 5 minutes, I am going straight to the police." Then Klay called back, but by then, Cheryl was not calling to ask if he had seen Jacques in a casual way. She was already afraid something had happened, and she put that fear directly in front of him.
I said, "Klay Waller, if I don't hear from my sister in 5 minutes, I am going straight to the police." And so, well, you know, the phone rings. "Hey, Cheryl, what's going on?" I said, "You know exactly what's going on. Where is my sister? You've done something to her."
You told him that?
"Yes."
What did he say?
"Well, I will, if I see her, I'll let you know. I'll tell her to call you."
That was it. No clear concern that the mother of his children was missing after coming to his house. So Cheryl stopped waiting. She left the other 2 triplets with her parents in St. Genevieve, got into her car, and drove about an hour to Jackson. When she walked into the Jackson Police Department, she had Jacques' last words. She had Klay's strange response. And she had everything Jacques had told her before that day. So she told police plainly, "I know Klay Waller has killed my sister." At that stage, Klay had not been charged with anything connected to Jacques' disappearance. And publicly, Jacques' family said she and Klay were estranged, but Klay reportedly pushed back on that. He claimed they were not estranged, that they were not fighting, and that Jacques was only looking into bankruptcy. Jacques' family denied that completely. To them, this was not a woman who had randomly walked away. This was a woman going through a divorce, a woman who had told her sister she was afraid, and a mother whose 3 children were now waiting in Cheryl's home without knowing where their mother was. When Cheryl later spoke publicly, she made it clear where the children were. The triplets were with her, at her house, and she described that house as their home. So, Jackson Police Chief James Humphrey later said they were already working through more than 260 leads. He also explained that Jacques' last known whereabouts came through Cheryl and through Jacques' own words. Jacques had said she was arriving at Klay's house around 4 p.m. to pick up Maddox, and those were the last words her loved ones had from her. But when police went to speak with him, his version of the day created the first major contradiction. When he was asked when he had last seen Jacques, he said he had seen her all day. Then he gave police a timeline that started much earlier than the attorney's office. According to Klay, Jacques had met him at a drugstore sometime after 11 a.m. They had lunch together, then they separated for a while, and later that afternoon, around 3 p.m., they met again at the attorney's office. Up to that point, the story could still sound possible. But then Klay explained what happened after the appointment, and that was where the first major problem appeared. He said Jacques came to his house after the meeting, but according to him, she was not there to pick up Maddox. Klay said Maddox was not even at the house. He said Maddox was with his girlfriend in Illinois, and that Jacques had come over because she wanted to discuss the divorce. That mattered immediately, because Jacques had told Cheryl something very different. She had said she was pulling up to Klay's house to get Maddox, and then come home. So now police had 2 versions of the same stop. In Jacques' version, she was going to Klay's house for her son. In Klay's version, the child was not there, and Jacques had come for a conversation. And that changed the way investigators had to look at the whole day, because if Maddox was actually in Illinois, then Jacque had either been mistaken about where her son was, or someone had made her believe he was waiting at Klay's house. But Klay's story did not end there. He said he and Jacque argued. He said she left the house on foot, and he said that when he returned after 6 p.m., her car was gone. That was the version he gave early on. Jacque had come over, they had argued, she had walked away, and later her vehicle was no longer there. Later, Klay would add another claim. He would say Jacque had come to his house for one last sex before the divorce was final. But investigators did not have to wait for that later version to see the problem. The first story was already shifting the focus back to him. Because Klay was not just saying Jacque left, he was asking police to believe that Jacque left without telling anyone, after going to a house for a reason that he now said was not true. With Jacque still missing and Klay's story already raising questions, the investigation moved quickly. So officers, search teams, and volunteers started covering the areas around where she had last been connected. The search was not small. Teams moved through hundreds of acres. They checked land, roads, wooded areas, and water. Some crews searched ponds and river areas, while others moved through open ground under difficult heat. The weather made the work harder because searchers had to come in, rest, drink water, and then go back out again. Even the dogs could only work for short stretches at a time because of the heat. And as the search grew, Jacques' family saw something they would not forget. People came from different places to help, including volunteers from outside Missouri. Some came from states as far away as South Carolina and Florida. Many of them had never met Jacques, but they still showed up, walked through difficult areas, and helped look for a woman whose family was desperate to bring her home. This was no longer just Cheryl calling around, hoping Jacques had changed plans. This had become a full search for a missing mother. Then came the first major clue. Jacques' Honda Pilot was found abandoned near Interstate 55, close to the Fruitland exit. At first, it raised a possibility investigators had to consider. Maybe Jacque had a flat tire. Maybe she got stranded. Maybe someone saw her on the roadside and took advantage of the situation. But when investigators looked closer, that possibility started to fall apart. One of the tires was flat, but the details did not match a normal roadside problem. The rim was not damaged, which meant the vehicle had not been driven any meaningful distance on a flat tire. Investigators later believed the puncture had been made while the vehicle was stationary. In other words, the flat tire did not look like the reason Jacques ended up on the side of the road. It looked like part of a setup. That changed the direction of the case. Because if the vehicle had been staged, then someone was trying to make Jacques' disappearance look like something it was not. And once investigators had that possibility in front of them, Klay's version became even harder to accept. Officers contacted Klay, but he did not respond like a man eager to help clear up confusion about his missing wife. He said he needed to call his lawyer, and after that call, he made it clear he did not want police searching the car or the house. That did not stop investigators. They moved to get warrants. They wanted to search Jacques' Honda Pilot, Klay's truck, and the house where Klay had been staying. Those searches mattered because the case had started with a phone call and a missing woman, but now it had an abandoned vehicle, a staged-looking tire, and a husband whose first story already did not match what Jacques had told the people closest to her. During the search of Jacques' Honda Pilot, FBI agent Brian Ritter noticed what looked like a blood spot near the back of the vehicle. Then investigators searched Klay's truck, and they found more of what looked like blood smeared on the inside of the driver's side door. But when the samples came back from testing, the result was not what investigators expected. It was fish blood. It was specifically bighead carp. And the strangest part was not just that the blood came from a fish. It was that Klay had allegedly put it there himself.
Just did that fish blood. I want to see if they would be shady.
That told investigators something important about Klay, even if that specific sample did not tell them where Jacques was. It suggested he was not just sitting back while police searched. He was inserting himself into the investigation. He was creating distractions, planting false trails, and trying to turn the search for his missing wife into a game he believed he could control. But the next search did not feel like a game. Back at the house where Klay had been staying, investigators noticed something that immediately stood out. The hallway carpet was missing. That was not a small detail because Jacques had last been connected to Klay's house, and now part of the flooring inside that house had been removed. Then they looked closer at the hallway. There was blood on the walls. It appeared someone had tried to clean the area, but not well enough to erase what had happened there, and when that blood was tested, it did not come back as fish blood. It came back as Jacques'. That changed the weight of the investigation. For investigators, that made it much harder to believe Jacques had simply argued with Klay and walked away. However, there was still one major problem. Jacque had not been found, and without her, prosecutors still had a difficult case ahead of them. So investigators went back to the day Jacques vanished and began rebuilding every movement they could find. So investigators started looking for anything that could show where Jacques and Klay had been before she vanished. The first part of that timeline led them to a drugstore. Around 11 a.m. that day, Jacques was seen meeting Klay there. At that point, there was nothing publicly alarming about the meeting. They were separated and they were heading toward divorce, but they still had children together and they still had things to settle. So seeing them together earlier in the day did not explain what happened, but it helped investigators establish that the two had contact before the attorney meeting. Then, about 2 hours later, Jacques appeared on ATM surveillance, and that became the last known video of her alive. But after that, the timeline began to shift toward Klay. Hours later, Klay was seen inside a toy store, and investigators noticed something important. He was wearing different clothes from earlier in the day. Then another video showed Klay's truck, and the truck had a trash can in the back, and it was towing a small boat. That boat would become one of the most important pieces of the timeline, because witnesses had already placed Klay leaving his home with a boat, and later, investigators would have to ask where that boat had gone and why it mattered. Then came the car wash footage. Klay was seen washing the boat carefully. Investigators believed he appeared to be checking it closely as he cleaned, as if he was looking for anything that might still be there. And when a person connected to a missing woman was seen cleaning a boat after she vanished, the river naturally became part of the investigation. So police released images of the boat to the public. That decision brought in a lead. A young man and a young woman came forward and said they had seen a similar boat near Devil's Island, a remote area on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River. Investigators searched Devil's Island more than once. They looked through the area, followed the lead, and tried to find anything that could explain where Jacques had gone. But at that point, they found nothing. So, Agent Brian Ritter eventually convinced Klay to come in for a formal interview. But according to Klay, the blood in the hallway came from an accident in the kitchen. He said it was not a major event. In his version, Jacques had a nosebleed, and that explained why her blood was in the house. But his explanation did not stop there. He said Jacques had been trying to clean herself up when she tripped on the green carpet. That, according to him, explained the blood on the carpet. And when investigators wanted to know why the carpet had been removed, Klay said he did not want the homeowner to find it and think something bad had happened. It was an answer, but it was also a strange one, because by Klay's version, his estranged wife had a nosebleed, bled on the carpet, and then he removed the carpet, cut it up, and hid it away, not because something serious had happened, but because he was worried someone might misunderstand. Then he gave more details about what he said happened after that. Klay said he and Jacques argued about financial issues. He said he became angry and threw her keys into a tree. Then, according to him, Jacques said she would walk to a friend's house. He claimed she left on foot and had her purse with her. After that, Klay said he used a broom handle to get the keys down from the tree. Then he put the keys on the windshield of Jacques' vehicle. And once Jacques was supposedly gone, he said he left the house too. Klay claimed he drove around the Cape Girardeau area without his phone. He said he stopped in different places, including wooded areas and roadside spots. In his version, those hours were ordinary and disconnected from Jacques' disappearance. But investigators were not just listening to the story. They were comparing it to everything else they already knew. And over the next several weeks, Klay's behavior gave investigators even more reason to doubt him. So police placed a tracker on Klay's vehicle, hoping it might show them where he went, who he met, or whether he returned to a place connected to Jacques. But Klay seemed to know he was being watched. He would drive to vacant lots and sit there for long periods, doing nothing that clearly moved the case forward. Then search teams would follow those leads, check those areas, and spend time looking in places that turned out to be empty. It made investigators feel like Klay was not just avoiding them, he was playing with them. And while police were trying to follow him, Jacques' face was everywhere. Pictures of her were being shared. Searchers were still looking. Her family was still waiting. The community wanted answers. But Klay's behavior, according to those accounts, did not look like quiet grief or urgent concern. He allegedly drove past Jacques' parents' house, honking his horn. He allegedly mocked people who were searching and said they were not going to find anything. He reportedly called them fools, made rude gestures toward investigators and searchers, and acted as if the entire search was something he could laugh at.
To say a few words today?
Well, I'll say it after the thing.
He also pointed investigators toward another man, a former associate named Gary, suggesting Gary may have had something to do with whatever happened to Jacques. But police had already looked into that theory, and it did not hold. So the focus stayed where it had been from the beginning, on Klay, on his house, on the missing carpet, on Jacques' blood, on the staged-looking car, and on the story he kept trying to tell. However, suspicion was not the same as an arrest for Jacques' disappearance. Investigators needed a charge they could prove, something that would get Klay into custody while the larger case continued to build. And Klay's confidence finally created a charge investigators could act on. By this point, Cheryl was not only Jacques' sister, she was also the person caring for the triplets. After Jacques disappeared, the children needed safety, routine, and someone they already knew. So Cheryl stepped into a role she had never asked for, but could not walk away from. And that seemed to bother Klay. While investigators were still trying to build the larger case around Jacques' disappearance, Klay posted a threat online directed at Cheryl. It appeared in a discussion connected to the search for Jacques, and the message was not vague. It said, "You are dead, I promise. If those kids get hurt, I will get you 5, 10, 25 years from now. You have it coming." Cheryl saw the post, and she knew it was meant for her. And now, the same man she believed was responsible for her sister's disappearance was making a threat that reached into the future, as if time would not matter, and as if he wanted her to keep looking over her shoulder. So Cheryl contacted Agent Brian Ritter. That decision mattered because the threat gave investigators something they could act on immediately. So Klay was arrested, not for Jacques' disappearance yet, not for murder yet. He was arrested for threatening Cheryl. And while that may have seemed smaller than the case everyone wanted solved, it was still a major turning point. Klay had been walking around while the community searched for Jacques, while her family waited for answers, and while investigators tried to build a case without the one thing they still did not have. Now he was in custody. Klay eventually pleaded guilty to the federal threat charge.
Klay eventually pleads guilty to the federal charge of threatening Jackie's sister and is sentenced to 5 years behind bars.
It was not justice for Jacques yet, but it removed him from the street and gave prosecutors time to keep building the case that mattered most. However, prosecutors knew the case was delicate. Klay was already in federal custody for threatening Cheryl, and now they had to prove something much harder, that he had killed Jacques. But there was a problem that made even the most confident attorneys uneasy. Jacques' body had not been found. With all of that, prosecutors filed formal charges, first-degree murder and tampering with physical evidence. But the missing body remained the biggest obstacle. Without Jacques herself, proving intent and establishing the sequence of events beyond a reasonable doubt was incredibly difficult. So the attorneys and investigators began negotiating a plea deal. Klay would plead guilty to a lesser charge, second-degree murder. In exchange, he would receive a sentence of 20 years, and he had to comply with very specific conditions. He had to confess fully in court, detailing the killing step by step. He had to provide the location where investigators could recover Jacques' body, and he had to account for the movements and actions that led to her death, including the body's disposal. This deal guaranteed the family both a measure of justice and the chance to finally bring Jacques home. And it meant that, at last, investigators had a path to the place they had already searched before, hoping it would finally lead them to the answers that had eluded them for nearly 2 years. So Klay led them back to the place they had searched before. He led investigators back to Devil's Island, a remote area on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River near Cape Girardeau. However, when investigators reached the area, Klay could not point to one exact spot. He did not walk them straight to Jacque. He gave them the general area and said she had to be somewhere around there. And after everything investigators had already seen from him, the false evidence, the changing explanations, the staged-looking scene, and the way he had toyed with searchers, they had every reason to wonder if he was still playing one more game. But then one detail started to matter. Klay had said he placed fertilizer at the burial site. At first, that may have sounded like just another strange detail in a case already full of them. But investigators knew something about fertilizer. In large amounts, it could damage roots and affect the trees around it. So they began looking at the land differently. They were not just looking at the ground, they were looking at the trees. They were looking for anything that did not match the rest of the area. And then they noticed it. Among the trees, one was dead. That dead tree gave them the clue they needed. After nearly 2 years of searching, waiting, and listening to Klay deny what Jacques' family believed from the first night, investigators finally found her. For Jacques' family, that discovery brought an answer, but it was not a relief in the simple way people might imagine. It meant they could finally bring her home, and that was what her parents had wanted for so long. And then came one of the hardest parts. Cheryl, Bob, Stan, Ruby, and the family had to tell the triplets. These were children who had already spent nearly 2 years without their mother. Now the adults who loved them had to explain that their mother was not coming home, and that their father was responsible. That conversation was the kind no family should ever have to prepare for. After that, Jacques' family could finally do what they had been waiting to do since June 1st, 2011. They could lay her to rest. The funeral took place on Stan and Ruby Rawson's 50th wedding anniversary. Instead of celebrating 5 decades of marriage, they were saying goodbye to their daughter. But Klay's plea deal did not end with him leading investigators to Jacques. He still had to sit down and give an account of what happened. But even when he confessed, he still tried to shape the story in a way that made himself look less responsible.
I wonder how much time you would give the kids if everybody knew you just beat me up. I'm like, beat you up?
I hit her backhand into the side of her neck. That was the first thing I did.
You backhanded her across her neck?
Yeah.
She stayed standing?
No, she went straight to the ground.
But then he admitted something that made his later claims much harder to believe. He admitted he had dug the hole the day before. That one detail changed the meaning of everything else he said, because it showed preparation before Jacques ever arrived at his house on June 1st.
Hole the day before was not premeditation.
Well, I guess you could see it that way.
Then he claimed it started with an accident in the kitchen. He said Jacques had been near the refrigerator and that he accidentally hit her nose. According to him, that was why she started bleeding. Then he said she became angry, moved toward the hallway, and began provoking him. He claimed she said he would never see the children again. That was how Klay tried to frame it. An accident, an argument, a sudden loss of control. But the problem was still there. He had dug the hole the day before, and his minimized account did not match what the legal and medical evidence showed. In court, the allegation was not about one small accident that went out of control. The court record described repeated actions against Jacques that caused her death. So even inside his confession, Klay was still trying to reduce what he had done and push blame back onto Jacques. Then came the jail call. Before sentencing, Klay spoke with a relative, and instead of sounding apologetic, he focused on himself. During his confession, Klay admitted that he had dug the grave in Illinois on May 31st, 2011, one day before Jacques disappeared. Then, on June 1st, 2011, he crossed from Illinois into Missouri for the divorce meeting in Cape Girardeau. That detail mattered. It meant the case was no longer only about what happened inside Missouri. Federal prosecutors could now look at the fact that Klay had crossed state lines with the intent to commit domestic violence. So even though the state murder case ended in 2013, when Klay pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received a 20-year sentence, the wider legal fight was not over. Then a call he made to his relatives showed just how arrogant and unremorseful he is, especially seeing that he might get away with just 20 years behind bars. However, years later, the federal case came in. On October 5th, 2017, Klay pleaded guilty to interstate domestic violence. Then, in 2018, he was sentenced to 420 months in federal prison, which meant 35 years. For a man who seemed to believe the 20-year deal was the final limit, the federal sentence changed everything. And the case still had another chapter. Klay had also tried to shape the story in his own way. He had written, or tried to write, a manuscript about what happened to Jacques. The title was along the lines of, "If you take my kids, I'll kill you." And according to federal material, he agreed to give up any money he could ever receive from any book, movie, newspaper, magazine, radio, or television production connected to the crime. Klay had even tried to use another inmate, Cedric Dean, to help ghostwrite the manuscript. Whether Klay wanted attention, money, control, or all three, the result was the same for Jacques' family. It felt like one more attempt to take ownership of a story that was never his to profit from. Then came the victim impact statements. Jacques' family had already lived through the disappearance, the search, the discovery, the funeral, and the confession. But now they had to stand in court and speak about what Klay had taken from them. Her parents had lost a daughter, Cheryl had lost a sister, and the triplets had lost the mother who should have raised them. The most emotional words came from Maddox.
Yes.
Why was that important to you?
I just wanted to help make a difference. Is that the case? Like, I already knew what happened and everything. And I thought I should just do this message just so he knows, like, I don't care for him anymore. It's just like that he gets that he has ruined the bond between us and him, and that he's never gonna have that back. Like,
the family remained hurt, but they were not broken. Cheryl kept Jacques' memory alive, and the children grew up surrounded by people who made sure they knew they were loved. Klay Waller tried to control the story, but the story did not end with him. It ended with Jacques' sister keeping her promise, with 3 children growing up in a home built around love, and with Jacque Sue Waller remembered as more than the case that took her life. And that's where this case comes to a close. What do you think about everything that happened? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story stayed with you, there are more cases on the channel that explore situations just as disturbing. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and share the video. It helps keep stories like this from fading away. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.